She grew up in a small house where the walls were thin and the worries were thick. Every sound carried arguments, sighs, whispered prayers at night. The house stood at the edge of a crowded neighborhood, where people knew each other's problems even if they pretended not to. From a young age, she learned how to stay quiet, how to read faces, and how to lower her eyes when elders spoke. In her world, respect meant silence, especially for girls. Her father worked irregular jobs. Some days he came home tired and empty-handed. Other days he brought just enough to buy bread and lentils. Her mother tried to stretch every coin, turning simple food into meals that could feed everyone. The girl helped however she could. She cleaned, cooked, and took care of her younger siblings. School was the only place where she felt light, where she could breathe and imagine a life beyond the narrow streets. She was good at her studies. Teachers noticed. They said she had a sharp mind and a gentle heart. She dreamed of becoming independent one day, maybe working in an office or teaching children. She never asked for luxury. All she wanted was choice. The freedom to decide her own life, but freedom was expensive, and her family was already drowning. Debts had been piling up for years. Medical bills. Loans taken from the wrong people. Promises made in desperation. Her father carried the weight of it all on his shoulders, but it bent his back and hardened his heart. Every knock on the door made him tense. Every unfamiliar face on the street felt like a threat. One evening, the girl noticed something different. Her parents were talking in low voices in the next room. When she entered, the conversation stopped. Her mother avoided her eyes. Her father's face looked set, as if he had already made a decision and locked it away. That night, she could not sleep. Her chest felt tight. Something was coming. She could feel it. Days passed, and the house felt heavier. Relatives started visiting more often. Women whispered in corners, casting glances at her. Men spoke seriously with her father, nodding as if discussing business. No one explained anything to her. Then one afternoon, her aunt called her into the room. The girl sat on the floor, hands folded, heart racing. Her parents sat across from her. The silence was long and uncomfortable. Finally, her father spoke. His voice was firm, leaving no room for questions. He told her that a marriage proposal had come. The man was older, well settled, and willing to help the family financially. He said it was a good opportunity, one that should not be refused. For a moment, she did not understand. The words sounded distant, like they were meant for someone else. Then the meaning hit her all at once, like cold water marriage. She was not asked how she felt. No one asked if she wanted this. The decision had already been made. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Her hands began to shake. She looked at her mother, hoping to find some comfort, some sign of resistance. But her mother's eyes were full of tears. She refused to let fall. Her father explained that the man would clear most of the family's debts. He said this marriage would save them all. He said sacrifices were necessary. He said this was her duty. She wanted to scream that she was not a sacrifice. She was a person. She had dreams. But the words stayed trapped inside her throat. That night she cried silently into her pillow. She thought of her school books, her unfinished dreams, the life she wanted. All of it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. The days that followed were a blur. Preparations began quickly. There was no engagement celebration, no happiness in the house, just urgency. Her clothes were chosen for her. Her future was decided by others. Whenever she tried to speak, she was told to be patient, to trust her elders, to stop being selfish. The man she was supposed to marry came once with his family. He barely looked at her. When he did, his eyes made her uncomfortable. There was no warmth, no kindness, just ownership. She realized then that this was not about love or even tradition. This was a transaction. Fear settled deep inside her. She stopped eating properly. Sleep became difficult. Her friends noticed she was distant. When they asked what was wrong, she forced a smile and said nothing. She thought about running away, but where would she go? She had no money, no place, no support. Every path seemed closed. One night, she stood on the rooftop, looking at the city lights in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were living freely, choosing their own lives. She wondered why she had been born into a world where her voice did not matter. Her wedding date was fixed. As the days counted down, her heart grew heavier. The house filled with guests and noise, but she felt invisible. Her mother tried to comfort her in small ways, bringing her favorite food. Sitting beside her, quietly, but never once spoke against the marriage. That silence hurt more than harsh words. The night before the wedding, the girl sat alone in her room. Her bridal clothes lay folded nearby. She touched the fabric, feeling nothing. No excitement. No joy. Only fear. She whispered a prayer. Not for wealth. Not for revenge. Just for help. For a miracle. For someone, somehow, to see her pain. She did not know that far away. A man she had never met was about to cross her path. A man whose life was nothing like hers. A man known for power and wealth, but also for something rarer – justice. She did not know that this forced decision meant to break her, was quietly setting the stage for a moment that would change everything for now. All she knew was that morning would come, and with it, a future she never chose. She woke up to the cold, dim light filtering through the thin curtains of the small room. The sound of the morning crowd outside reminded her that the world had not paused for her troubles. She felt the weight of the previous night pressing down on her chest. The humiliation, the fear, the knowledge that her life was slowly being pushed toward a path she never wanted to take. It all felt unbearable. Yet, there was no one to comfort her, no one to tell her that she deserved better, no one to listen. Her family had already made their choice, and she was trapped in their decisions. She dressed quickly, choosing the plainest outfit she could find. One that would not draw attention, one that would make her invisible. Even as she moved quietly through the small house, she could hear her mother talking in hushed tones with a visitor. The visitor's voice was firm, commanding respect. She knew who it was, her future husband's brother. A man she had only seen from afar, but whose presence had already filled her with dread. She forced herself to stay in her room, pretending to be asleep. Though her heart raced with fear, every sound seemed magnified in the tiny house, the creak of the floorboards, the low murmur of voices, the occasional cough from the neighbor outside. She tried to calm herself, repeating the little mantras she had learned over the years. I am strong. I will survive. This is not the end. But deep down, she knew that these words were fragile, like thin paper in the storm of her life. The storm was coming closer, and she could hear it in the whispers of her family. By mid-morning, the tension had become unbearable. She could no longer pretend to be asleep. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out of the room and into the hallway. Her mother looked at her with a mixture of pride and something else she could not read, fear, perhaps, or disappointment. She didn't want to meet her eyes. She didn't want to answer the questions that she knew were coming. The man in the living room looked at her with a polite smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze was sharp, assessing as if he were measuring every inch of her to see if she was suitable. She felt her stomach churn with anxiety. The words that were meant to be exchanged between them seemed impossible to speak. Her voice would tremble. Her thoughts would scatter. She wished she could disappear into the walls, into the floor, into nothing at all. But she could not disappear. She had responsibilities, expectations, obligations she had not chosen for herself. Her younger brother looked at her with innocent trust, unaware of the storm that was building around them. He depended on her, and that gave her a small measure of strength. She had to hold it together, even if it meant swallowing her own fear and pain. The conversation that followed was formal, almost mechanical. Her mother and the visitor spoke in carefully measured tones, discussing arrangements, dowries, and dates. She nodded when prompted, though her mind was elsewhere. Every word felt like a chain, every agreement like a lock tightening around her freedom. She kept her hands folded in her lap, trying not to fidget, trying not to show the panic that bubbled beneath the surface. After what felt like hours, the man finally stood and offered a polite farewell. She exhaled quietly as the door closed behind him. The tension in the room did not ease, though. Her mother tried to comfort her in a way she had never done before, speaking words that were meant to soothe, but only reminded her of the reality she faced. She nodded politely, smiled faintly, but inside, her heart ached. Later that afternoon, she walked outside to get some fresh air. The sun was warm on her face, but the warmth did little to lift her spirits. The neighborhood around her was bustling, filled with people who had no idea of the struggles hidden behind closed doors. She watched children running and playing, carefree and joyful, and felt a pang of longing for a life she could not have. She wanted to scream, to run, to break free from the chains that bound her, but there was no safe way out. Every thought of escape came with the risk of shame, of anger, of retribution. She returned inside, her mind restless, and tried to focus on small tasks, sweeping the floor, washing dishes, tidying up the small home. Each movement was mechanical, almost robotic. Her thoughts wandered constantly, imagining what life would be like if she could choose for herself. She dreamed of freedom, of walking down streets without fear, of making decisions that were truly her own. But each dream felt distant, almost impossible, and she struggled to hold on to the hope that seemed so fragile. That evening a visitor arrived. He was different from the others. His presence carried a calm authority, but it was not cold or intimidating. Instead, there was a kindness in his eyes, warmth that seemed out of place in her world of strict rules and harsh expectations. He greeted her family politely and asked about their well-being. She watched him from a distance, curious despite herself. There was something about him that made her feel slightly lighter, though she could not explain why. As he spoke, he seemed to notice her. He asked questions, not just polite ones, but questions that seemed to show genuine interest in her thoughts, her feelings, her dreams. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was safe to speak, but something in his demeanor made her want to respond. Slowly, she found herself talking, sharing small pieces of herself that she had hidden away for years. He listened patiently, nodding, acknowledging her words without judgment. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. Not for her beauty, not for her status, not for what she could offer, but for who she was. It was a strange, almost surreal feeling, and it brought tears to her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed by her vulnerability. But he noticed and smiled gently, making her feel that it was okay to be human, to feel, to express herself. The conversation continued, and she felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the path that had been forced upon her. Maybe there were people who could help, who could understand, who could intervene in ways she could not. She did not yet know how or when, but the seed of possibility had been planted, and it gave her a strange sense of courage. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the man she had just met. She did not fully understand who he was or why he had come to her home, but she felt a sense of reassurance that she had not felt in a long time. She imagined a life where she could make her own choices, where her brother could grow up without the shadow of fear looming over them, where she could live without being trapped by the decisions of others. The thought was intoxicating, almost too good to believe, but it fueled her determination. She knew that the days ahead would not be easy. The threats, the expectations, the social pressures, they were still there, looming over her like dark clouds. But now, there was a glimmer of light breaking through, a sense that change was possible. And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she could be free. Where she could be in control of her own destiny. Sleep eventually came. But it was not the restless, anxious sleep of previous nights. It was a light, cautious sleep, filled with dreams of hope and possibility. And as she drifted off, she promised herself that she would not give up, that she would fight for herself and her brother, that she would not let the circumstances of her birth define the rest of her life. Somewhere, somehow, she believed that a miracle could happen, that someone could step in and change everything. And deep down, she felt that the miracle had already begun. The next morning felt heavier than usual. She woke up to the familiar sounds of her small home, the clatter of dishes, the distant laughter of children outside, the low hum of life going on around her. But today, there was a subtle difference. A quiet tension lingered in the air, one that made her senses sharper, her heart beat faster. She knew that change had begun, and it scared her more than she could admit. She moved through her morning routine mechanically. Breakfast was eaten in silence. The words exchanged with her mother were minimal. Yet in her mind, she replayed the previous evening over and over. The stranger who had appeared at their door, his words, his calm, the way he had looked at her, the patience in his voice. Something about him felt different from anyone else she had ever met. She tried to push the thoughts away, telling herself that he was just another wealthy person who would soon disappear, leaving her trapped in the life she'd always feared. But the thought refused to leave her mind. As the day went on, she noticed small changes around her. Her younger brother seemed lighter, happier, as if he too had sensed a shift in the air. He asked her questions about things she hadn't dared to consider before school, games, dreams of the future. She answered him carefully, smiling despite the gnawing anxiety in her chest. It was strange to feel such small moments of joy, given the weight of what lay ahead, but she clung to them like lifelines. Later that afternoon, a message arrived. She didn't expect anyone to reach out, especially not someone like him. But there it was, an invitation written in a polite, considerate tone, asking if she would meet him again. She hesitated. Fear and caution warred with curiosity and hope. What could this person want from her? Why would he take an interest in someone like her, a girl who had been told her place was limited, her options restricted? After long moments of contemplation, she decided to go. She told herself it was just a meeting, a polite conversation, nothing more. But even as she prepared, selecting the simplest dress she could find, her hands trembled. She didn't know what would happen, but deep inside, she felt that her life could be on the verge of changing forever. The meeting place was a quiet cafe in a part of town she rarely visited. The streets were alive with activity, yet she felt a world apart as she walked toward the entrance. Her heart raced with every step, a mix of excitement and fear. When she entered, she saw him waiting, seated at a small table near the window. He rose politely as she approached, offering a smile that was warm but respectful. Without pretense or arrogance, they began to talk. At first, the conversation was light, casual, almost ordinary. But soon, it deepened, touching on subjects she had rarely spoken of with anyone: her hopes, her dreams, her fears. She spoke of the life she had been forced into, pressure to marry someone she didn't love, the helplessness she had felt for so long. He listened intently, never interrupting, never judging. It was the first time she had ever felt that someone genuinely cared about her thoughts and feelings as they spoke. She noticed subtle signs of empathy. He didn't just hear her words. He understood the weight behind them. He asked questions, not to challenge her, but to clarify, to show that he truly wanted to understand. Each answer she gave seemed to bring them closer, and for the first time in years, she felt a fragile sense of relief. Maybe she was not alone after all. Hours passed, but the conversation never felt forced. Time seemed to stretch and bend, carrying them into a realm of understanding that felt almost magical. She laughed occasionally, a sound she had almost forgotten she could make. He smiled when she did, not in amusement, but in recognition of her humanity. It was a rare connection, one that she had never expected to find. As the evening approached, they left the cafe together. The streets outside were filled with the golden glow of streetlights, the world taking on a softer, gentler hue. She realized that for the first time in her life, she was walking alongside someone who made her feel safe, someone who made her believe in possibilities she had never dared to imagine. Over the next few days, her meetings became more frequent. Each encounter strengthened the fragile hope that had begun to grow inside her. He offered practical advice, guidance, and sometimes just silent support. Standing beside her as she navigated the challenges of her daily life, he did not try to rush her or pressure her into decisions. Instead, he gave her space to think, to process, to begin believing in her own strength. Her family noticed the subtle change in her demeanor. She moved with a little more confidence, spoke with a slightly firmer voice, and carried herself differently. Her mother expressed a mixture of curiosity and skepticism, asking questions about the stranger's intentions. She answered carefully, revealing just enough to satisfy her mother without giving away the full scope of the bond that had formed. Her younger brother noticed too, following her with bright eyes, asking questions about their new friend. She smiled at him, grateful for the small joys that now colored their daily lives. But not everything was smooth. There were obstacles, as always. Gossip began to circulate in the neighborhood. People whispered, questioning why a wealthy man would take an interest in a girl from their modest home. Her heart sank at first, fearing that this scrutiny could undo all the hope she had begun to feel. Yet she found strength in his unwavering support. He reminded her that she deserved respect, that she had the right to make her own choices, and that their connection was something private and meaningful, not for others to judge. Slowly, her fear began to transform. It did not vanish completely, but it shifted into a cautious determination. She realized that she had the power to influence her own path, to make decisions for herself, and to protect her brother from a life she knew would be harsh and limited. The awareness was both frightening and liberating, a paradox she was still learning to navigate. One afternoon, he took her to a place that felt like a world away from the confines of her home. It was a quiet garden filled with flowers she had never seen before, and paths lined with trees that whispered in the wind. She breathed deeply, taking in the colors, the scents, the peace of the surroundings. He walked beside her, gently encouraging her to explore, to touch, to feel. For the first time, G realized that the world held beauty beyond what she had ever imagined. She spoke about her dreams for the future, the education she wished to pursue, the life she hoped to build. He listened, affirming each aspiration with sincerity. He offered practical suggestions, pointing out ways she could gradually achieve her goals, always respecting her pace, never forcing her hand. It was a delicate dance of trust and encouragement, one that slowly nurtured the courage she had almost lost as the sun began to set. Casting golden light over the garden, she felt a sense of peace that had been foreign to her for years. She knew the challenges ahead would be difficult. The forced marriage arrangement had not disappeared. Her family's expectations still loomed. Yet, for the first time, she believed that there was a way to navigate through the obstacles, a way to claim her own life without dishonoring the people she loved. That evening, as they parted ways, he gave her a small, reassuring smile. It was a promise without words, a commitment to stand by her, to help her find a path forward, to offer support when the weight of the world became too heavy. She walked home with a lightness in her step, a sense of hope that seemed almost tangible. She realized that miracles did not always arrive as grand gestures. They sometimes came in the form of a steady presence, a guiding hand, and the unwavering belief that someone else saw her worth. When she returned home, she found her younger brother waiting eagerly. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he asked about her day. She laughed softly, telling him stories of the garden, the flowers, and the strange, wonderful man who had entered their lives. In his innocent joy, she found renewed purpose. She knew she had to fight, not just for herself, but for him as well. That night, she lay in bed, reflecting on the weeks that had passed. The fear was still there, lurking in the corners of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. A seed of courage had taken root, nurtured by kindness, patience, and understanding. She closed her eyes, imagining a future filled with possibilities, with freedom, with the chance to live life on her own terms. And for the first time in a long while, she slept with a sense of hope, knowing that the miracle she had been waiting for was not just a distant dream. It was quietly unfolding before her eyes. The following days were filled with a strange mix of tension and excitement. She moved through her home with a sense of purpose that had been absent for years. Each task, no matter how small, felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. She looked at her younger brother with renewed determination, vowing silently that she would protect him from the hardships she had endured. She knew that the decisions of adults around her had already shaped much of her world, but she was learning that she could still carve out a space where she and her brother could live safely and with dignity. The man who had entered their lives remained a steady presence. He did not overwhelm her with gifts or grand promises, but his consistent attention and support created a quiet comfort that she had never known. He asked her questions that prompted her to think about her own needs and dreams, encouraged her to express her feelings, and offered gentle guidance without ever pushing. This subtle approach allowed her confidence to grow bit by bit, like a plant reaching towards sunlight. One afternoon, he suggested they visit a place where she could learn new skills and explore opportunities she had never imagined. She hesitated, unsure if it was safe or appropriate, but something in his calm demeanor encouraged her to take the chance. When they arrived, she saw a group of women engaged in discussions, sharing ideas and learning from each other. She realized that for the first time, she could imagine a future where her potential mattered more than her. Family's expectations, the classes and activities he introduced her to, were small but significant. They focused on practical skills, communication, and self-confidence. He explained that knowledge and independence were powerful tools, ones that could help her navigate her current situation and build a life she could truly call her own. As she practiced and learned, she felt her sense of self returning. She no longer felt invisible or powerless. Each success, no matter how minor, strengthened her belief that she could change her circumstances. Back at home, the challenges remained. Her family still spoke about the impending marriage in hushed but insistent tones. She tried to stay composed, carefully listening without revealing the full extent of the support she had gained. Her mother's pride in her was mixed with worry, as if she sensed the shifting balance of control in their household. The tension was palpable, but she refused to let it break her. She had discovered a quiet strength, one that had been hidden beneath years of fear and submission. At times, she found herself reflecting on the moments that had led to this turning point, the humiliation she had endured, the constant pressure. The sense of being trapped at all seemed like a distant shadow now, less powerful than it had once been. She realized that those experiences had taught her resilience, the ability to endure hardship, and the capacity to recognize opportunity when it appeared. The fear that had once dominated her life was slowly being replaced by determination. One evening, she received a message from the man asking if she could meet him at a nearby park. She agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. When she arrived, she found him waiting near a small fountain, the water sparkling in the fading sunlight. He greeted her with a warm smile and gestured toward a quiet bench nearby. As they sat, he spoke about the importance of planning for the future, not just reacting to the present. He suggested practical steps she could take to secure her independence. He spoke about saving money, learning skills that could lead to employment, and exploring educational opportunities. He emphasized that these actions would not just protect her from the immediate pressures of the forced marriage, but also give her long-term control over her life. She listened intently, taking mental notes, realizing that for the first time, she had a roadmap to freedom. Over the next few days, she began implementing his suggestions. She set aside small amounts of money, practiced skills she had learned, and explored options for her education. Each step, no matter how small, reinforced her sense of agency. She felt a growing confidence, one that made her posture straighter, her voice steadier, and her interactions with her family more deliberate. She was learning that change was possible, but it required patience, courage, and persistence. Despite these positive developments, fear still lingered. The looming threat of the forced marriage was never far from her mind. She knew that her family might react strongly if they discovered the changes she was making or the support she had received. There were moments of doubt when she questioned whether her efforts would be enough to protect her and her brother. Yet each time, she felt despair creeping in. She remembered the man's consistent presence and the way he had listened, guided, and encouraged her. That memory became a source of strength. One evening, as she walked home with her brother, she noticed neighbors whispering and casting glances toward her. She felt a familiar pang of anxiety, but she held her head high. She realized that she no longer needed to hide entirely, that she had the right to exist with dignity, even under scrutiny. The small victories she had achieved, the skills she had learned, and the support she had gained created a shield that allowed her to face the world with newfound courage. In the quiet moments of the night, she reflected on the journey so far. The fear, humiliation, and pressure she had endured had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She had discovered the possibility of change, the presence of someone who believed in her, and the tools to gradually reclaim her life. Her dreams, once fragile and distant, now seemed tangible and achievable. She could envision a future where she was not merely surviving, but thriving, where her brother could grow up in a safe, nurturing environment, and where she could finally live on her own terms. The man continued to play a pivotal role, but always in a respectful, empowering way. He never imposed solutions. Instead, he guided, suggested, and supported. His approach allowed her to regain control over her life gradually, one step at a time. She realized that miracles were not always sudden or dramatic. Sometimes they arrived quietly in the form of steady support, understanding, and the opportunity to rebuild oneself. One day, she received news that a distant relative was planning to visit. Initially, she felt anxiety, fearing scrutiny and pressure to conform. But as the day approached, she noticed a shift in herself. She faced the visit with calmness, addressing questions politely and confidently. Her family noticed the difference and commented on her poise and maturity. She smiled quietly, knowing that the credit belonged not to herself alone, but also to the guidance and support she had received. As Part 4 progresses, the stakes grow higher. She begins to prepare for the possibility of openly challenging the forced marriage, finding courage in her growing independence. She knows that confrontation is inevitable, but she now possesses tools, confidence, and allies to navigate it. Her relationship with the man continues to deepen, rooted in respect, care, and shared purpose. Each day brings small victories, building toward the moment when she will fully claim her life and transform the circumstances that once held her captive. The morning sunlight felt different that day. She woke with a sense of determination that had been quietly growing inside her for weeks. Every step she took, every decision she made had led her to this moment. The fear that had once consumed her was still present, but it no longer controlled her. Instead, it had transformed into cautious courage, a tool she could use to face the challenges ahead. She looked at her younger brother, sleeping peacefully beside her, and felt a renewed sense of responsibility. She would protect him no matter the cost. And she would finally take control of her own life. She spent the morning preparing quietly, moving through her home with purpose. The air was filled with anticipation, though the house itself remained calm. Her mother observed her, sensing a change she could not fully understand. The words of caution and control that had always shaped her life were now met with calm defiance. She smiled faintly at her mother, a small gesture that carried confidence and assurance. This day would be different, she told herself. Today, she would take a step that would change everything. The man who had guided her, supported her, and believed in her waited nearby, ready to assist without imposing. When she arrived at the meeting place, she saw him standing quietly, his calm presence comforting her. He greeted her with a simple nod and a reassuring smile. There were no grand gestures, no promises made. Only the quiet understanding that he was there to help her navigate a path she had long feared to tread. They began with a conversation, reviewing the steps she had already taken. Her confidence had grown, and her words were steady and deliberate. She outlined her plans, the strategies she had prepared, and the support she had gathered. He listened intently, offering guidance where necessary, but always allowing her to remain in control. She realized that this partnership built on respect, patience, and understanding was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was not about wealth or power. It was about empowerment, about reclaiming agency over her life. By midday, they moved toward the first step of action. She would confront the situation directly, assert her right to choose her own path, protect her younger brother from being forced into circumstances he did not understand. The tension was palpable, but she felt an inner strength she had not known before. She repeated to herself the words that had carried her through past struggles. I am strong. I will survive. I deserve better. Each repetition solidified her resolve, fortifying her courage. The meeting with her family was inevitable. She approached the house with her heart pounding, aware of the potential resistance she would face. Her mother met her at the door, a mixture of curiosity, fear, and something else, perhaps hope flickering in her eyes. She greeted her calmly, without hesitation or fear. Today, she would speak with clarity and conviction. When her father and the other family members gathered, she took a deep breath. She began to speak, her voice steady but firm, explaining that she had made preparations for her future, that she was capable of making her own decisions, and that she would no longer accept arrangements made without her consent. She spoke not with anger, but with calm authority, emphasizing responsibility, fairness, and the well-being of her brother. There was shock, disbelief, and resistance. Her words had disrupted the balance that had always existed, the unquestioned control that others had assumed over her life. But she remained composed, answering questions, addressing concerns, and showing that her actions were not impulsive, but carefully thought out. The presence of the man who had guided her added weight to her words. He supported her not by speaking for her, but by standing beside her, reinforcing her confidence and lending quiet authority to her position. Hours passed in tense discussion. There were moments of anger and doubt, moments when she felt her courage faltering, but she held firm. She reminded herself of the path she had walked, the skills she had learned, and the steady support that had nurtured her confidence. Each time fear threatened to overwhelm her, she focused on her younger brother, the reason she fought so hard for autonomy and safety. Gradually, the resistance softened. Her family began to understand that she was no longer a passive participant in her own life. The careful preparations she had made, the guidance she had received, and the confidence she displayed convinced them that she was capable of making informed decisions. They began to accept, reluctantly at first, that her choices deserved respect. The balance of power, once unquestioned, began to shift. With the immediate confrontation behind her, she felt a sense of relief, though she knew the journey was not yet complete. The forced marriage would no longer define her, but she still had steps to take to secure her independence fully. She continued working with the man who had supported her, expanding her skills, learning more about the world, and planning for a future that belonged to her alone. Each day her confidence grew, and her sense of purpose became clearer. Her younger brother noticed the change too. He looked to her with admiration and trust, relying on her strength while gaining confidence from her example. She found joy in nurturing him, in guiding him through life's challenges with wisdom and patience. Together, they began to experience a life that, while not perfect, was full of possibility and hope. Weeks later, the man suggested a final step, an opportunity that could solidify her independence and provide stability for her and her brother. It was a chance to move into a safe, supportive environment where they could live without fear of coercion or control. The offer was generous, but she accepted not because of wealth or luxury, but because it represented freedom, security, and the ability to build a life on her own terms. The transition was emotional. Leaving the home she had known, stepping into a world she had never fully imagined, brought tears of relief and joy. She carried with her the lessons she had learned, the skills she had developed, and the courage that had grown within her. Each step forward was a testament to her resilience and determination. Settling into the new environment, she found herself surrounded by resources and support that allowed her to continue growing. She pursued education, developed professional skills, and nurtured relationships that reinforced her confidence and self-worth. The man who had guided her remained a steady presence, offering advice and encouragement, but always respecting her autonomy. Their bond was rooted in trust, respect, and a shared commitment to her empowerment. Over time, she achieved milestones she had once thought impossible. She secured employment, became financially independent, built a network of friends and mentors who supported her growth. Her younger brother thrived alongside her, receiving education and care that allowed him to dream freely, without the constraints of fear and coercion. The life that had once seemed dictated by others' decisions was now shaped by her own hands. Reflecting on the journey, she realized the full magnitude of her transformation. From a life dominated by fear and coercion, she had moved to one defined by autonomy, confidence, and hope. The forced marriage that had once loomed as a threat had been transformed into a catalyst for growth and change. The support, guidance, and unwavering belief of the man who had stepped into her life had played a crucial role. But ultimately, it was her courage, resilience, and determination that had allowed the miracle to unfold. The story of her life now was one of empowerment. She had faced fear, humiliation, and coercion, and emerged, not broken, but stronger, wiser, more determined than ever. Her journey was a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of support, and the profound impact that belief in another person can have. As she looked toward the future, she felt a sense of peace and confidence. Challenges would continue to arise, as they always do, but she now possessed the skills, courage, and support necessary to navigate them successfully. She understood that true freedom was not given. It was earned through patience, determination, and the willingness to step forward even when the path seemed uncertain. In the quiet moments of the evening, as she watched the sun set with her younger brother playing nearby, she smiled softly. The journey had been difficult, filled with fear, uncertainty, and struggle. But it had also revealed her inner strength and the capacity for change. The forced marriage that had once threatened to define her life had become the turning point that allowed her to claim her independence, protect her brother, and build a life of hope and possibility. And in that moment, she knew that the miracle she had waited for was not a single event or act of fortune, but the culmination of courage, resilience, and the belief that she could, and would, shape her own destiny. She had stepped into a future of her own making, and nothing could take that away.